Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and we're coming to the end of 2016, so this is one part of a two-part video series that I've decided to end this year off. Of course there are going to be other videos coming out before and after this, but hey, the main thing is just I want to wrap up this year with talking about what games have come out this year and kind of ranking what I feel were the best and worst of this year. So of course we're going to start with a positive note. This video is going to be the best games of 2016, and we've had a fantastic year, an absolutely phenomenal year for gaming. I mean, yes, the rest of 2016 has had its up and downs, but you know what? I think, at least in the world of game releases anyway, we've had it pretty damn good. So, beginning with the 5 best games of 2016. And we're going to begin with the honorable mentions. These are games, and there is actually a fair amount of these, that didn't make it onto the list of 5. It was very, very hard for me to come up with the 5 games. So these are games that I want to mention, but they just didn't quite make it onto the list. Now, a fair warning here, the games that I'm putting on this list at all, and it's the same that goes for the worst games, which is coming tomorrow, these are games that I have played, but not necessarily played on the channel. They can be on any platform, but they must be released in 2016. And they cannot be DLCs on their own, but the game and DLC can be included together if it makes a significant difference. So, the honorable mentions for best game of 2016 include Superhot. Now, Superhot is an example of a game where a simple mechanic can go a long way, and when it's done well, it makes the whole game better as a result. Superhot was a game where time only moves when you do. Well, that's not entirely true, because time sort of moves very, very slowly when you don't move. But that includes every movement, from the camera movements to the actual physical movement of the player on the level. That is kind of how it all plays out. So, a simple mechanic going a long way. They had a very interesting story woven into it, but the gameplay itself was enjoyable and compelling, and it had that sort of one more try feeling to it every time you died, because you could just restart so quickly that you didn't really have to wait at all. It was a game that you could get through so quickly. And I think that's really what made the game good. It was good for speedrunners, but it was also good for perfectionists, and it made you feel like an absolute badass every single time you played it, because it played back the entire round in normal speed after that, and you could see your actual movements and how it looked, you know, and everything kind of looked like an action movie, which is fantastic. Next up is Abzu. Now, Abzu was a game that initially I thought I would put higher on this list. I actually did think it would be higher on this list. It is a gorgeous game with a beautiful art style and a really nice story that's told only through the game itself with no narration. Obviously, you know, coming from the creators of Journey means that it has that sort of vibe, but I felt like, having played Journey, I still think Journey was the better game overall. It was far more compelling, simply because of that co-op feature, where you just got matched up with strangers, and you went through the hardships together, and you didn't even know who they were until the game ended, but you shared those experiences. And there's one moment in Journey in particular, and this is big spoiler warning if you've not played the game. Pause the video now. You can probably skip ahead. I might put an annotation if I remember to on the screen. But yeah, if you haven't played Journey, please go and play it, because it is fantastic. But there is one moment in the game where I was with a total stranger, and we were trying to get through a snowstorm together. And during that bit, there was, you had to sort of warm each other up by chirping and all that, and it just felt like you were kind of encouraging each other to keep going, to keep pressing on. And it's so compelling, because this is, you know, you're trying to keep your co-op partner alive while they try to keep you alive, and you don't even know who this person is, but you want so badly to make it through that with that person, and that's what I got out of the game. It was that the journey itself was a struggle, and you were made to feel like every single part of it was a hardship that somebody was helping you through. even in the parts where you seem to be alone. And there was always that moment of like, oh no, come back, every time, you know, they got left behind or they went a little bit further ahead. You know, you didn't really want to lose sight of this random stranger joining you on the journey. So I honestly think that was a really good game, and the only reason why Abzu isn't higher on this list is just because it didn't really evoke those sorts of feelings, because it was a very different game. But I still got the sense of wonderment and the very calm nature of the entire journey through Abzu because of how it plays out. I'm not going to spoil anything for Abzu, but it is just genuinely a gorgeous game. TrackMania Turbo. Now, TrackMania is a game that has had a very checkered history, I would say. It's always had several different iterations, but it always felt like each iteration of the game was still a bit outdated. With the exception of TrackMania Nations, I believe is what it was called when I first played it. That was a little bit more, you know, it was on the times when it came out, and TrackMania is all about the actual tracks more so than the cars, so it's all about stunts and speed and getting the best line through each individual level. It is basically a racing platformer where you compete for the best times. So, you know, speedrunners galore and everything like that, but if you like driving games, this was a game that really challenged you and pushed you to the limits. And TrackMania Turbo is the latest iteration of it that came out this year, which I think has captured what TrackMania is all about. It still has that essence of one more go, I can do this better, and it just pushes you to keep going on and on. And the game itself looks fantastic. It's a sort of game that doesn't need to look fantastic, but still does anyway. And even if you're chasing down that top time, you're not going to be disappointed if you stop on the track and just gawk at the scenery for a little bit, because it is on the level of being unnecessarily detailed. And I think it's really something I can appreciate from a game like this. Stardew Valley. Now, the Stardew Valley is a game that initially a lot of people would compare to Harvest Moon, because it is essentially somebody decided, I want a modern, or you know, a new Harvest Moon game, and decided I'm going to make it. And there it is. Stardew Valley is that game. It has a story you create yourself. You choose who you meet, who you befriend, who you eventually marry, and each person has their own sort of story arc, so you could really get yourself invested in the characters while exploring the world. And of course, if you just want to farm, you can do that too. You can go fishing, you can farm all sorts of different vegetables, and you can even have livestock and animals as well. And all of that led for a very compelling game loop. And of course, if you really got deep into the game, you could really find a lot of different things to do. So it's a game that doesn't lack in content. And it's also a game that has not just a compelling story, but one that you've created yourself. And I think that really wraps it up in a very nice, neat little package with an adorable art style on top of that. So yeah, good game. But of course, those are the honourable mentions, and, you know, sit back and relax now, because we are moving in to the actual top 5. The actual list of games that I think were the best of 2016. Now, of course, remember I said that this has been a fantastic year for gaming, so it was very difficult for me to put this list together. So, yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of discussion in the comments of whether or not this is correct, but hey, you know, if you have a different list, feel free to list it down in the comments below, and maybe put a little bit about why you think these games are good, because I always want to see what people think. So, beginning at number 5 is Transport Fever. Now, this was a difficult one for me, because looking at Transport Fever, the main issues I had with the game were performance, and that's about it. I mean, I did feel like the years ticked by in the game a little bit too fast, but overall, Transport Fever is a game that, once it is properly optimized, will be a lot of fun to play. Now, the game itself is already compelling. I found that when I played the game, I kept wanting to play it. I've lost hours and hours of days in game just playing Transport Fever because of how compelling the game is. Unfortunately, once you get to about 100 to 200 vehicles in one area, the game starts to tank the frame rate really badly, and that's the only thing that really cuts down on the enjoyment. But with the amount of mods already available for the game, considering it's only been out for about a month at this stage, is kind of fantastic, and I do really want to see the game's community thrive. If the developers can make the game more optimized and run a lot better on more systems, I can definitely see this game really taking off. But overall, what I went into it with was I was looking for a modern Transport Tycoon game. And this plays so similarly to Transport Tycoon that I basically just felt like I was playing Transport Tycoon again, and in the best possible way. So overall, probably one of my best games of the year, and that's the reason it's on this list. Number 4, Planet Coaster. Now, Planet Coaster is a game that I think everybody's been waiting for. If you are a fan of Roller Coaster Tycoon, if you just want to build things to the finest, tiniest detail, this is the game for you. And frankly, they've nailed it. Yes, there are some issues with performance on certain systems. There are issues with the building system. I didn't really enjoy the building system all that much. I found it a bit clunky. But all of these things can be improved over time. The main thing is, the core of the game is being able to build however and whatever you want, and to a certain degree, they've done that. And Planet Coaster is a fantastic example of how, you know, keeping with the central idea and expanding on, you know, past experience from Frontier, of course with Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, has really paid off. So, the only reason really it's not higher on this list is I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. But that's really just a personal preference. It could be higher up on the list for a lot of other people, but Planet Coaster is still definitely worth the money. Number 3, Tom Clancy's The Division and the Survival DLC. Now, this is probably going to be a controversial one for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people joined on the bandwagon of hate against The Division when it first came out. It was glitchy at launch, so was basically every other Ubisoft game, and while I don't find that particularly acceptable, I think at this stage we've come to accept it, very unfortunately. However, The Division, I feel, was let down by its marketing more so than the actual game. The core gameplay is still an action RPG, a loot shooter, whatever you want to call it. It is basically Diablo 3 with guns, and I think if they had marketed it towards the RPG crowd more so than the realistic tactical shooter crowd, they might have actually had a much better response. And unfortunately, the marketing is what led to people putting the game down very early on, because frankly, it didn't appear to be what it looked like in the trailers, and I completely understand that. However, it is a game that I really thoroughly enjoyed. When it first came out, I had about 90 hours into it, which for me is a lot of time to be able to spend in a game, because I just found the gameplay so compelling. But with the Survival DLC, that's very much brought me back into it, because after losing interest for a little while, you know, I kind of got the gear that I wanted, and I felt like I was kind of done with the content at that point. I did some Dark Zone stuff, I did some endgame stuff, and that's really it. But when I went into the Survival DLC, it's a totally new game, and I really appreciate that they've done this, because that on its own is a very good competitor to these survival games that I just frankly don't enjoy as much. Games like King of the Kill, games like The Culling. I don't really find them to be my sort of thing, but the Survival DLC is far more compelling than that because of the RPG aspect of it, and the addition of the survival elements that people just thought would be in the game from the beginning. But these two things combined make it one of the best titles of 2016 for me, because of just the pure, sheer amount of hours that I was able to put into it, and how many of those hours I actually enjoyed. So, third on this list, couldn't be higher really, because there are better games this year, but definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. Number 2, Overwatch. And should this really surprise anyone that Overwatch would be on this list at all? It's a game that, while it can be criticized for being multiplayer only, I feel is probably one of the best games of this year, simply because of the compelling lore, the little bits of nods towards the lore in the game, and just of how compelling the game itself actually is. Now, Overwatch, its gameplay is fast-paced, frenetic, chaotic, and I don't think I've felt as much excitement in any game while playing it. The number of times I've had matches where I've just left it with my heart absolutely pounding because of the adrenaline I've been having is just unthinkable. There's just, I can't even count how many times that's happened to me while playing Overwatch. And there are moments in that game where you just feel amazing because of the moves that you're able to pull off. Yes, sometimes it's probably luck. In my case, actually, it's probably 100% luck, but it's still enjoyable all the same. It's not the game that I get too competitive with. I do enjoy playing a little bit of competitive from time to time, but I'm not naturally a very competitive person, so Overwatch's competitive scene isn't really for me, but I still enjoy the game all the same. So, really, I just find it, overall, as a multiplayer game, it is a far better packaged title than a lot of other multiplayer-only games I've seen out there. And when it comes to just my enjoyment of the lore, the characters are definitely very compelling and definitely very enjoyable to read up about. I think I would be fair in saying that even the people who don't care about lore still want to find out about what the voice interactions are like or why characters look the way they do. I think it's a game that makes you care enough about the characters to want to know just that little bit more, even if you're not that sort of person. But hey, maybe I'm wrong about that, let me know down in the comments. So now we've gone through most of the list. The last one left is the #1 spot, and well, I'd be right in saying it would be a Game of the Year if it is, of course, the #1 in a Best Games of 2016 list. So what could it be then? I mean, there's a lot of games that have come out this year, and a lot of them are very, very good. So what could it possibly be? If it isn't Overwatch for me, after all, if you look at my channel, if it's not Overwatch, what could it possibly be that's my Game of the Year? Well, this was a very difficult decision, and I know I said that for most of the list, but genuinely, Game of the Year title for me is a big deal. It has to be a game that combines not only a compelling story, compelling universe, characters, and a good multiplayer, if it has one, to really be that Game of the Year contender. Now, I'm not saying that Game of the Year must have a multiplayer component, but if it does have one, it should be a good one and not something that's merely tacked on. However, in the #1 place, 2016, my Game of the Year, Hatsune Miku Project Diva X. Now, I did think quite a lot about putting a PS4 and PS Vita game on here, especially one that's anime themed, and I know this is probably going to shock a lot of you people, but I'm actually kidding. It's, of course, Titanfall 2. Now, Titanfall 2 is a game that I've recently finished the campaign of, and I can without a doubt say that it was probably one of the best single-player campaigns I've ever played. The movement system is on par with games like Mirror's Edge. It is absolutely fluid, and I'm talking about Mirror's Edge, not the remake, reboot thing, the Catalyst one. I'm talking about the original Mirror's Edge. And it was such a simple yet effective system to use. Simply move, spacebar, sprint, and you're done. And you just had to find the fastest route to get to where you needed to go, which is, of course, the essence of parkour. And in Titanfall 2, they nailed that so well. It was not only simple, easy to use, but it was also very effective, and it changed the game so much. Compared to a lot of other FPSs out there, there is still no game that does the movement system like Titanfall, with of course the exception of Mirror's Edge, but there really is no FPS game, especially a multiplayer FPS game, that plays like Titanfall does, and Titanfall 2 expanded on that formula by adding new game modes, by adding in new weapons, and so on. And while I would still like to see the original rodeo system in Titanfall 2, I can understand that it's much more fluid in Titanfall 2, and definitely works a little bit better, of course the battery mechanic being the main thing now. But of course, the buddy system and all of the little mechanics in multiplayer really shine. But of course, in the single-player campaign, now I've played a lot of campaigns before, and the interaction with Jack Cooper and BT is just some of the best that I've seen. You do have varying dialogue options, not that they really make a huge difference other than playing a little bit of dialogue. But by the end of it, I was so invested in the characters that I wanted to hear what they said. Granted, the only characters that you really care about in the campaign is Jack and BT. The villains even, while they have their special intro and they have their own unique personality, they're not memorable in any way, which I think is probably the worst part about the campaign, is just the villains are not memorable. They are just a boss fight and then you're done. You won't really care or remember who they are after that. But the game's story seemed to be focused just on the interaction between Jack and BT, and in that sense at least, they completely nailed it. They are some of the best written characters that I've seen in video gaming so far, and their story arc is just so much fun to go through, and I am just happy that I've played it. So, you combine a good single-player campaign. It's about 6 to 8 hours, depending on how you play it, and of course how good you are at parkour. But the introduction of mechanics and everything is so well paced that even from a gameplay perspective alone, if you take out the fantastic story, it's still pretty compelling to play. I would actually still play the campaign if it was just a bunch of jumping puzzles. But that being said, you combine the good single-player campaign with a very compelling multiplayer, and you've got a package that is well suited to be a lot of fun. The only problem is that the release date and the lack of marketing, I think, might actually, unfortunately, let the game fade into obscurity a lot sooner than it deserves to. But frankly, I think that's more EA's fault, and it's probably one of the reasons I dislike EA, but then again, they did allow Titanfall 2 to come into existence, so I guess I can't be that mad. But that is it. Titanfall 2, my game of the year for 2016. What is your game of the year? And in fact, what is your top 5 for this year? Do let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, if you agree with this list, and also subscribe if you're new to the channel, because of course, somehow people find the channel from videos like these. I have no idea why. But, of course, if you like any of the games on this list and you want to get yourself 20% off, don't forget to check out Green Man Gaming with my link down below to get yourself 20% off of any of these games on the list, or any games that are coming out or will come out in future. My name is Panzer. Thank you very much for watching. Happy holidays, and I'll see you next time.